It's time I discuss some facts with you. Now, James Dean was left handed. So is his son left handed. Left handedness is a genetically inherited trait. Um, James Dean weighed 8 pounds 10 ounces as a baby, which is an enormous baby. And they say scientifically, modern studies show that large babies equate to large adults. At that birth weight, 8 pounds 10 ounces, he should have been 200 plus pounds and over 6 feet tall. That's scientific. Um, his mother, Mildred, his supposed mother, Mildred, was married when she was 4 months pregnant. There are no wedding photos showing her pregnant. That's when the baby bump shows. There are no maternity photos whatsoever of her showing her pregnant. She is only pictured with a large baby. Um, Being born in an apartment in a large town, Marion, Indiana. They had a hospital. Leading cause of death for women back then was childbirth. So it doesn't make sense for her to have had an apartment or her baby in an apartment where everyone could hear what was going on in the apartment. I mean, that's just ridiculous, and it's hard to believe people have swallowed that lie. When it was pretty obvious just by looking at Mildred and comparing James Dean's blonde hair and blue eyes to her, it's pretty apparent she was not the biological mother. Which means Winton was not the biological father either. So, which may be why they didn't get along, Winton and James. And it may be why James Dean wrote Little Bastard on his car. Because he found out about his heritage through his friend, James D. Word. Um, he also may have written Little Bastard on his car to spite not only his father, but also Jack Warner, um, which is why he was killed. They didn't want James Dean to be, doing that kind of stuff because they were making a lot of money with this film business. And just having one person step out of line like that meant other people could too. So the whole thing was a setup, and they've been playing you for like 80 years. Well, 80 since his birth, but a little more than that, I guess. The accident, even the accident, I don't know how they gave no fault, uh, decision. Nobody was ticketed. Turnipseed didn't get any fine or jail time or nothing. It was just, and if you think about it, when you're coming down a road and you turn in front of a car, um, there's going to be a head-on collision. So James Dean had to have moved, across I guess he moved away from him, and Turnipseed kept coming at him. And if you think about it, just the self-preservation of there's a car, I'm going to steer the other way. You don't keep going at him when the other car is moving away from you. It wasn't a head-on. It was kind of a, you know, he hit James Dean in the driver's side. So um, that the way what they've said about the accident doesn't make any sense. Um, but that's what they've said. So, that's what everybody believes because that's the official story. Um, there's other scientific things I was going to tell you, but well, let's get into my own genetic um, story, and that is um, Ancestry is owned by, well, essentially it's AT&T is the big company, but they have an investment group called Blackstone. Um, Blackstone, the Vanguard Group, State Street. It's like the big three of the investment firms. It's trillions of dollars they have, and they're like the parent company or major investors into Blackstone and AT&T. I think it's valued like 16 billion or could be more than that. Warner Brothers, which if you think about the coincidence of Warner Brothers and Time Magazine getting cozy and joining after, it was a decade or two after James Dean died, but that is the magazine that Dennis Stock's photos came out in. So you have Warner, Time, AT&T, which another one of their companies they own is Ancestry.com. So, that kind of, it's not a monopoly because it's not in the same sector, right? It's not like they own all the trains, but they own so many different companies. They can, shift things around, manipulate when someone, like say for instance, me comes along and says James Dean's my grandfather. The people who have made trillions of dollars off of James Dean's name can just go to Ancestry and say, hey, let's fuck with this guy here. And what they've done is they came out with this new tool. They've done other little things along the way too, but they came out with a new tool maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and it has it's a genetic comparison to the geographic area. So your matches, who you match with, they would also match you with a geographic location. So for instance, I have a genetic match who is related to James Dean, probably like a grandniece or something, a nephew. Anyhow, her genetic grouping, or his, is Missouri, around in that area. And the first time they sent me the notice to check out our new tool, we shared that same genetic group as well as Maryland and the Ohio River Valley. So I was like, okay, well, that's for sure. That's, the Wilsons. Richard Wilson, who is James Dean's real biological father, was from Wilsons who originated in Maryland. And so the next time I checked, I looked at, the genetic grouping. I was just trying to decipher a few more matches, and they had erased my common check mark with the Missouri, Maryland area. And I'm like, well, that's weird. What's going on here? So I looked at another match who I know for sure is one of my paternal matches associated with my great grandmother, who was from the South. She was from Alabama, and when originally we shared all of that area, Kentucky, Alabama, that southern area. Um, and I was like, they erased that too. I mean, that just does not make any sense. Um, so what they did is they completely erased all of my paternal matches with any geographic location and just left my maternal matches or check marks in the my maternal origins, which is Maine. And I know for a fact none of my paternal ancestors came from Maine. So back to the um, who Ancestry is owned by, and Warner Brothers and Blackstone, BlackRock, the Vanguard Group. These are people with trillions of dollars who, they don't want James Dean's grandson to be known as James Dean's grandson. They'll do anything to hide it. Um, and there's really nothing I can do about it. They'll do whatever they want. The corporate world is essentially, their philosophy is Art of War by Sun Tzu. That's their Bible. They don't, secrecy is of utmost importance. Um, Misinformation, propaganda. They don't want you to know what they're doing because you could get there first, right? So um, the whole thing that they've spun with James Dean is, largely propaganda. I mean, there's a few undisputed facts in there, like where he lived and whatnot, but most of it is not true. Um, Even down to being gay. He had girlfriends. He lived, what, 5, 6 years after high school? And, Liz Sheridan claims to have been engaged with him in New York. He liked Pierre Angeli, um, and numerous others, women. And at the same time, they're saying he's having gay relations with theater people to get acting gigs. He's got a gay relationship with a minister in Indiana, James DeWord, which was actually his friend, and others in Hollywood who claim to, it's just, but James DeWord, no one thought he was abusing children in Indiana, and, if he was, he probably would have been abusing other children, right? Most preachers, it's multiple, you know, accusers that come forward and say, you know, this person was abusing me. And most people who are abused by these preachers do not become longtime best friends for life, which Jimmy and DeWord were. So, I'm willing to put the past in the past, and I don't even have to exhume the body to prove it, that James Dean is my father. I have over 50 genetic matches with Richard Wilson and Shanita Watkins. And I think I've told you this, but he shot his wife November 27th, 1930. Up and take the clock forward 2 months, February 7th, 1931, which is when Mildred got an 8-pound, 10-ounce baby. And we know that babies gain that 1 to 2 pounds a month when they're healthy with their mother's nursing. So it's likely James Dean wasn't getting that full pound to 2 pounds of growth in that first 2 months because he wasn't getting a mother's care. So he was um, maybe a little underweight for 2 months, but not really. That's about right. Um, so uh, there's just so many facts that line up to what I'm telling you is true. Um, Everything from the location. My family um, lived in Terre Haute, Indiana. Robert Leroy Searing was an architect who, I believe, he helped to design Cadle Tabernacle Church. The Pettigues, his relatives, his paternal relatives, lived around Indianapolis. So, um, and Cadle Tabernacle was the largest church in the country at the time when it was built. It sat over 10,000 people and covered an entire city block in downtown Indianapolis. So it's definite that um, the architect Robert Searing, my great grandfather, would have been there. If, maybe just to check it out. And that's where James DeWord was coming to help put on an evangelical radio broadcast. They would get, letters from people all over the country, and they needed people to go over the letters and, decide which ones to deal with on the air. And that's where DeWord was taking Jimmy, and he was playing with Joan. Excuse me. So that's what happened. Um, and then Joan, they lived in Manhattan. Well, they moved across the river to Stamford, Connecticut, but then back to Manhattan after Robert's wife. She ran off with a black opera singer named Aubrey Pankey, and Catherine Weatherly was her last name, from Alabama. She was really into the theater, in the 1920s. That was the epicenter of the American Renaissance, and running around town, going to theater shows, the jazz, I think Louis Armstrong and, all the people that we now think of as like the greats or the standards. She was going to see those people, and so was her husband, Robert Searing. And Robert Searing was an architect, so he had money. He actually helped to build or design